Well, hello and welcome to the Learn and Work Smarter podcast. This is one of my monthly interview episodes where I am bringing you an industry expert on some of the key topics that we talk about. And today, that is ADHD. Now, today's episode is going to be a little different from my usual format. It's less about strategies and more about the deeper mindset shifts that have to happen before those strategies even matter. We're going higher level, talking identity, fear of rejection, self-trust, and the kind of internal work that most productivity tips just don't touch. My special guest today is Lindsay Roberts, a multi-passionate business owner and the founder of ADHDKlub, Club with a K, which is a space for ambitious women with ADHD who feel stuck in overthinking, shame, or fear, even when they're sitting on life-changing ideas. Now, Lindsay has multiple psychology and teaching degrees and used to work closely with autistic teens in the classroom. She was diagnosed with ADHD at age 9, so neurodiversity has always been a part of her world, but everything just hit differently when she started building her own businesses. And that's when her fear of rejection came in hard, despite having incredible ideas and a really strong purpose. She launched a company called Ought to Know to help parents support their autistic children at home, but she ended up walking away from it. Not because she didn't believe in it, but because the fear of judgment and getting it wrong was too loud. Lindsay's going to share more about that story as we get into today's episode. But eventually, Lindsay realized she wasn't dealing with a business strategy problem. She was dealing with years of identity wounds from feeling misunderstood and not listening to herself. And that's when everything shifted. She stopped abandoning herself when things got scary, and in early 2025, she launched ADHDKlub, again, Club with a K, growing her Instagram from 0 to 75,000 followers in just 4 months. In this conversation, we talk about what it takes to stop running from fear, how to reconnect with your intuition, how to move forward when your voice shakes, what to do when you enter a classic ADHD hyperfocus mode. We definitely get into rejection sensitivity. So whether you're starting something new, maybe you're pivoting into something, more aligned with what you've always wanted, or you're just trying to show up for your own ideas. This is the kind of conversation that might just move something inside of you. I'm dedicating today's show to every listener with ADHD and to everyone who's listening who is supporting someone with ADHD. That is what this community is all about. All right, let's get into my conversation with Lindsay Roberts. Hello, you are listening to the Learn and Work Smarter podcast, the podcast for students and professionals who want to learn and work smarter. I'm your host, executive function coach, and founder of schoolhabits.com, Katie Azevedo. As a reminder, everything I mention in today's episode will be linked in the show notes, including a link to the transcript, which you can also find at learnandworksmarter.com/podcast. Well, hello, Lindsay Roberts. I am so excited to have you today on the show. I think this conversation is going to be such an asset to my listeners, and I would love to start by asking you to share your story today.
Hi, Katie. It is so lovely to be here, and thank you so much for having me. So my name is Lindsay Roberts. I'm from South Africa, if you're trying to pick up my accent. And I have ADHD. I'm a woman with ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 9 years old, which is pretty rare. A teacher of mine picked it up when I was 9. I was in the classroom and I was just daydreaming. I was always a daydreamer, and she picked it up, and I got diagnosed very early in my schooling career, which was very interesting because most of the time you find women are diagnosed usually later on in life, because sometimes it's pretty hard to pick it up in women in the schooling age. So I have this year, I ran my own businesses, and this year I started an Instagram page called ADHD Club to express my lived experience of having ADHD as a woman, as an ambitious ADHD woman. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a business owner, and I've just recently created a page to speak into my lived experience with it.
Well, that's incredible. And I just want to share for the listeners that your Instagram page is ADHDKlub with a K.
Yeah.
And you offer the most incredibly vulnerable and personal and authentic stories on there from someone who is living ADHD and also thriving. And the reason that I wanted to, have you, there's many reasons I wanted to have you on the show today, but one of the primary ones is that typically in my, episodes, that my approach to this show is to share strategies and roadmaps and tutorials and very practical how-to strategies for, let's just call them what they are, executive functions, which is learning
Yeah.
and working smarter, time management, all that stuff. And, there's a missing piece. And I thought that you'd be the perfect person to fill in that gap based on your experience and your expertise. I shared a little bit about your background in the introduction. But all of the strategies that I teach on this show, they work, but they only work if something else is in place. And that's where you come in. And I know that you speak a lot on your channel about, intuition and even self-awareness. And I thought that we could tap into some of that today, the mindset that has to be in place before someone is able to show up and say, okay, these are the tools available to me. These are the strategies that I can try, right? Because none of those are going to land if you don't have the headspace to even initiate that journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That is it. That's the missing piece that I had missing for very, very long in many parts of my career. I was very ambitious and I've had many different career moves as well. It's a common thing for ADHDers to continuously seek more. There's many reasons, but there's a big reason of that with that as well, is that we do have this incredible intuitive knowing and knowing that we want more, and we go on the search. And with that comes a lot of self-reflection, a lot of internal work as well, because we come up with lots of roadblocks. One of the biggest roadblocks for me, and I know for others, is the fear of rejection. There's a lot of reasons behind the fear of rejection for us, but it being one of our biggest blocks to actually going for the things that we want in our lives. So that is the internal work that I have had to do, so that I move forward and be brave and do the things that I know I'm meant to be doing in this world.
So I'm glad you brought that up because we call it, rejection sensitive dysphoria, but
Yeah.
rejection sensitivity. And that is something that, I'm an ADHD coach and I work with private clients who have ADHD, and the rejection sensitivity is present. And the shame that is behind that rejection sensitivity is, as you said, one of the most significant roadblocks.
Absolutely.
And, I might say, hey, let's try this strategy. Let's try this tool. Let's, go for this goal. We do a lot of goal setting, and they might be able to envision what they want for themselves. But then this fear
Mm.
of not being validated, not being accepted, right? The being rejected essentially is
Absolutely.
debilitating. So could you talk about a little bit about rejection sensitivity, how that shows up in someone with ADHD, and then what somebody, there's kind of layers here. So what
Yeah.
rejection sensitivity is, how it shows up with someone, with ADHD, because it's different. Someone with neurotypical also feels rejection, and
Mhm.
fears rejection, but it's different with people with ADHD. And then what can
Yeah.
somebody do to get through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is rejection is a normal part of life. So in order to move and do big scary things in our life, whether that's in your career, dating, even you run a business, you're going to come face to face with rejection. It's just part of it. But for people with ADHD, the experience of rejection is, I would say, 100 times worse than a neurotypical person. It is just this emotional react. I can't explain. I actually can't even put it in words, but I can tell you what my body does when I experience rejection or think that I'm experiencing rejection. I physically start to shake, I sweat, and my heart rate starts to increase. So it just shows that I feel very unsafe with rejection. And most people wouldn't feel very good with rejection, but our experience of rejection is that much more intense. So what happens is that because of that experience, we don't want it. So we don't want to go through that experience because it's so awful. So we try and avoid it as best as we can. And how we avoid it is that actually we stop doing things that may have a chance of rejection. And that's the biggest block, and that's the stuckness that we get ourselves into. So we've got these beautiful creative brains. We have got gifts and these incredible brains that can do the most amazing things, intuition, creativity. We're so afraid to go there because we have to move through that rejection, which is almost, for me, a very traumatic experience.
So the
Yeah.
rejection, the you mentioned the physical manifestation of it in your body, and as someone with ADHD, you know this, but emotional regulation is
Yeah.
one of the hallmark characteristics, or emotional dysregulation, one of the hallmark characteristics of those with ADHD. And so I just want to reiterate this because we have both said it, but for the listeners or the viewers here, I want to make this very clear. Rejection is hard for everybody, but it is very significantly different for people with ADHD. And part of the reason is because of essentially the dysregulation of emotions. And the challenge is kind of this cycle where if you're feeling dysregulated, then the thought of rejection is going to become exacerbated. And then you can feel it physically, and then you feel it mentally, and then you're trying to process, oh no, my body is acting this way. So then we become even more physically emotionally dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And then we all know that when we become emotionally dysregulated, nothing happens. We become paralyzed. Our executive functions just fall through the floor, right? We can't access any of the cognitive tools that we can have in moments where we're confident and we don't fear rejection. So it is this cycle. And so my question to you is, you're thriving, you're building this incredible business, and we can talk about that at as we get further in the show. But what strategies have you used when you're in this cycle of, hyper awareness of the possibility of rejection? What advice would you share
Yeah,
with those who are also feeling what you feel?
absolutely. And before I share that advice, I also just want to say that it is so lived with me still. And I think the biggest mindset shift for me was it is going to happen anyway. If you stay stuck, you are not going to do the things, your big dreams, your big dreams that you have been dreaming about for years are never going to happen. So that is like, that was the big kicker for me. Is like, I need to move through this in order to actually do the things that I want to do, or else I'm going to stay stuck the rest of my life. And feeling stuck the rest of my life is my biggest fear. My biggest fear is being 80 years old and looking back and going, oh my gosh, I didn't do the things that I wanted to do. And I stayed stuck in the self-sabotage cycle. So that was the big thing. And I've obviously got tools to help me through that. And before I speak of that, I just also wanted to tell you a story, because this might be very relatable as well. Is I used to be a special needs teacher. I used to work with autistic children in the classroom. So I've been in the neurodivergent space for many, many, many years. And after I finished teaching, I actually started a business where I was going to support children. I was going to support parents with autistic children in the household and help them set up their household to support their children. And now here's what happened. This is the most incredible idea. I was going to change lives. And I started this business, and a troll found me on social media and called me out and said, "Who are you to be teaching this?" And I from that one troll, and this was early on. So now, I mean, I've grown from this experience, but I shut the whole business down because of
Lindsay.
that rejection. Yeah. So this is now, like, I look back and I'm like, this is part of my story. And I think back to that and the amount of parents that desperately needed me, especially in South Africa, because we have very little support here for neurodivergence. I think of that and I go, I cannot do that to myself and to others who need my gifts again. So that is kind of the driving force, that like when the rejection sets in and I start shaking and going, oh my gosh, I can't do this, I think back to that and say, I've got so many gifts that are meant to be given to others, so it can't stop me. So that's the big, I would say that's the big why. And then I've got a few tools that I use surface level, and this is more calming the central nervous system here, is when I can feel it's oncoming now. So often, for example, if someone comes onto my Instagram page and they call me out again, like they did 3 years ago, I feel it coming, but I say, okay, this is rejection sensitivity. Okay, I can feel it. So it's the awareness of it. So you have awareness, this is it, and then I name it. So by naming it, my rejection sensitivity is called Clyde. And I name Clyde and I say, hey, Clyde, I see you there. And I talk to Clyde as another person. And what that does, it disempowers it. It takes the power away from it. So Clyde then is sitting next to me and I have a conversation with Clyde, whether it's an angry conversation or a kind conversation, I just have a conversation with Clyde. And then from there, I choose a tool to calm my central nervous system. And one of my favorite tools is to go and dance or go for a run or a walk or go speak to my partner to kind of regulate myself back. And that is kind of a high level tool that I use in the moment.
I love that.
Yeah. And then there's deeper, rejection sensitivity runs very, very deep into our subconscious mind. So there's lots of other things that I use to kind of rewire my mind around rejection, the actual rejection wound. And I go into my subconscious and I speak to myself there. So that's also for another day.
That's incredible. No, so let me just extract for the listeners, because you just shared so many valuable little nuggets right there. So it sounds like we're identifying that rejection sensitivity, it's a horrible feeling, right? Psychologically, physically. But what you're saying is a tool or an approach that you took is saying, okay, well, what's even worse than that? The idea of not reaching my potential when I am 80 years old and having this regret that I didn't go for it and there is no other chance, to go when you're 85. I mean, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the lesser, I think that approach is really valuable for someone who might be in your situation right now, to think of it as like, okay, which is the lesser of the two evils? This uncomfortable but temporary discomfort. And I know the word discomfort is underselling it. It can be paralyzing. We knew this. But it is temporary versus this lifelong regret that's not temporary, that you might end up having down the road. That one, you're saying, is worse. And so out of avoiding the worse evil, you face the one that's temporary and you're giving it a name. You're calling one of my favorite expressions is to call a duck a duck.
Yeah.
Or to call Clyde. Yeah, to call Clyde and to name it and say, this is what I'm feeling and I'm going to do the thing scared. Am I getting this right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the fear is not going anywhere. So yeah. And that's what and I think it just came with experience and just getting more mature in life and just going, you know what? My biggest fear, like I've got fear of rejection, of course, but my biggest fear is just not reaching the potential that I know. And it's not even just for me. I know I can help so many people. And I was like, I need to give this gift to somebody, and rejection can't stop me any longer.
I love that. Can we talk a little bit about intuition from the way that you like to explore the topic? Because that is not a word that I use often on the Learn and Work Smarter podcast. I certainly talk about mindset and even like gut feeling and, finding what works for you and things like that. But I don't often use the word intuition. And I know that for some people, it has this connotation of like very like woo woo, let's, light our crystals and find some, ethereal kind of force to tap into. And you're coming just from, learning what you do and your approach. You have this understanding of the power of intuition, particularly if you're an ambitious person with ADHD, that this is part of one of those missing pieces before any of the strategies land, right? We opened the show talking about like, there's all these strategies, but they don't land if you don't have the mindset. Can you talk to me about intuition and the role of an ambitious person with ADHD?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what lights me up the most. It is so exciting because everybody's has intuition. So something I'm not saying, ADHD people only have intuition. Everybody does. Everybody can tap into their intuition. ADHDers they are extremely good at pattern recognition. They are very good at picking up energy. They are usually very empathetic. Put those all together and it just gets them moving in their body, and they just can really listen. Their intuition really speaks to them. So the idea of intuition is that it speaks with you so that you get onto your most aligned path in life. So your intuition is your friend, and it really wants you to find that true north that you're meant to be doing with your life. And people with ADHD just can tap into their intuition so much more. So you feel it. And this is the thing, is that there's this big, almost like friction between, I'm so afraid of doing the thing because it's what society says I shouldn't be doing, and your intuition coming in and saying go that way. So we have this fight in our body and our mind around go this way and don't go this way. But every time I have actually trusted myself enough to listen to my intuition, the most incredible things have happened. And I'll give you an example now. This is one out of many, many, many examples. And this doesn't mean I'm brave and I follow my intuition automatically. It usually takes me about a year to actually get to the point where I'm like, oh, I need to at least follow it now, or it's never going to leave me alone about this thing. And then I eventually kind of give in. But really, intuition is coming down to self-trust. It's trusting yourself to know that this is the way you need to go, even if the signs are not there and people are saying, are you sure that's what you're meant to be doing? So, for example, I knew for about a year that I needed to create my Instagram page. I knew it. I was like, I have a voice. I know how to use words and emotion and inspiration. And I need to give my lived experience to others so that they feel seen in their life. And my intuition was calling me there for way longer than a year, but I only really started listening a year ago, almost beginning of last year. And then eventually, beginning of this year, I started my Instagram page and started giving my lived experience of ADHD. And I grew my page to 75,000 followers in 4 months, because everything I was posting was an intuitive, this is what you meant to be posting. And I've had the most incredible experience because of it. And that is me following my intuition wholeheartedly.
Incredible. That is absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. So I'm curious, listening to that, about the role of, I mean, if tapping into your intuition were so easy, more people would be doing it and reaching their goals with, no problems at all. So obviously it's not easy to do. And I'm curious about the impact of masking, which is a very common practice with people with ADHD. And masking, for those who may not be familiar with it, you could define this as, as well as, or if better than I can, it's, it's a performance where you read the situation that you're in and you say, okay, I need to be a certain way. My beautiful ADHD self wants to be a certain way right now. I might need this. I might be overstimulated. I might even need to be stimming in some kind of way, but the social appropriateness of the real me doesn't match my context, right? And masking is exhausting for people, especially if they spend all day at the office or they're in a social setting, and you spend a lot of time, trying to perform in a way that makes other people comfortable. And I would imagine that doing that, day after day, year after year, in some ways kind of tells your intuition, oh, not today. Please be quiet and stay in the corner, because we need to be this way in order for society to accept us. And it's when you're unmasked, this is, with someone with ADHD, when you take your mask off and you can be who you are, that's when your creativity shines. That's when your intuition is like, hey, like I've been here all along. But masking can kind of mute the strength of that intuition that I think we're all born with. Does that make sense? Do you think that that's what happens with
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a brilliant masker, by the way. Most people, before I started this Instagram page, there were only a select few. I could only give you like 3-4 people in my life that actually knew the real kind of ADHD Lindsay. Everybody else would be like, if I told them I had ADHD, they'd be like, no, no way, because I was so brilliant at masking it, because I was diagnosed at 9 years old and it was my biggest shame. I was so embarrassed about having ADHD as a little girl at school. My parents were amazing. My parents, I'm so grateful. My parents were amazing, but the school experience was really, really, really hard. So I learned how to mask and I'm brilliant at it. And I can, mask in any situation. And this year is the first time I've actually taken my mask off and been vulnerable around my ADHD experience on my page.
Mm.
So it definitely kind of pushes your intuition away. And here's the thing, your intuition never goes away. We just refuse to listen to it. And there's a lot of work you have to do to trust yourself enough to listen. And it's not even just listening, it's listening and then trusting yourself to move on it when nothing makes sense, when there's no proof of it making sense. And when I started my Instagram page, I was so vulnerable, and for 4 weeks there was no proof that this was working. And I was just going, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? This is crazy. But something was saying, keep going, keep going. So it's sitting in the darkness for however long it needs to be and trusting that it's coming. And I think that, there's a lot of layers here with why we mask and our identity with ADHD. However, like even online, and I think I started my Instagram page because I saw online there's so many Instagram pages going, you are bad because you have ADHD, or like memes that are just funny and relatable, but they're really negative and made me feel bad about myself. And I was just like, there's so much identity work that we need to do to actually come into the space of worthiness and self-trust and loving ourselves, self-love. Because for our whole life, whether you've been diagnosed late in life or early in life or middle of life, we have always felt different and something's wrong with us. And that's a huge identity, a lot of identity work we have to do to find worthiness again. And when you feel worthy and you start loving yourself, you start trusting yourself and you move on things, even when it's scared, even when you're
Gosh,
scared.
beautiful. Even when you're scared, especially when you're
Yeah,
scared, I would imagine.
especially. Yeah.
Right. So going back to the story that you just shared, which is you had this, you tapped into your intuition. You said, I am meant to share my story authentically, and I'm going to unmask on the most public space
Yeah.
that there is, which is social media. And the response to you over there has been, of course, there's going to be trolls everywhere, right? But
Yeah.
your growth and the comments, I go and I've read so many of the comments, and you are so loved over there and you are resonating. But you just made a point that, for weeks you saw nothing and you
Yeah.
had no evidence. And so I'm curious as to, because that's where most people stop. And that's usually where the rejection sensitivity kicks in. So maybe not even like a criticism, but the lack of a positive response can be perceived as a rejection. So what did you do? Like, I'm wondering, I can't help but like ask about tactical strategies because that's how my brain works. But what are some
Yeah.
of your systems that you did in that period where you're like, I'm just going to show up? Because I know with a lot of, the clients that I work with ADHD, like it's that they can't even get themselves to that point, right?
Yeah.
They wake up and they're like, I know I need to do this thing. They always know what they need to do. But
Yeah.
they just can't. The task initiation, they're like, right? So what did you do? What's your magic?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So this is where all the kind of mindset inner work happened. And this was the most important part of it. I do not have systems. I am a mess. Like everything you should see, right? Like everything's a mess. So I don't even and I know the systems are important, so important, but I needed to tap into my inner world to start loving myself again. That's really where it came from. So I did a lot of some subconscious work where I went into a lot of meditations, and I changed my belief system within myself.
Wow.
Where when in those weeks, and I've got videos of me. I took videos of myself in those weeks talking to a camera going, what am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. But I kept going because I kept going and tapping into my subconscious mind and making sure that I was changing my belief system within myself and going, I am worthy of this. This is right. Your intuition is guiding you. Trust yourself, love yourself enough, and really changing those kind of like those wires in my brain from I can't do this because of I'm getting rejected to I absolutely can do this. This is normal. It's part of it. It's a lived experience, and just holding space for that as well. And when I was feeling really upset, I was like, I can feel this emotion. Just sit with it. It's okay. It's okay. Don't push it away. Don't push it away. And really holding space for the emotions that come with it. And that was really what it was. And I have not, this is like, I'm still going through it. Like, rejection sensitivity is still a huge part. Like, my next step in with my page, I'm already stalling because I'm afraid of rejection. But I've got the tools now to be like, I can see this is scary. Let's move there. Let's go back into the subconscious mind and work on that belief system within yourself.
I love that. So it comes down
Yeah.
to what you had said earlier about, naming things for what they are, naming the
Yeah.
feeling for what it is, naming Clyde for who
Yeah.
for who he is. And when you have that sense of like, I don't know what direction I'm going in, and I don't know if this is the right thing, but my intuition says it is. So I'm just going to show up and just take the actions. Now, that kind of leads me into another juicy topic that comes up a lot with the people that I work with. And it's this concept of hyperfocus and this
Yeah.
magical, in both directions, situation that people with ADHD can find themselves in. And it can
Yes.
be like incredibly incredible, or it can
Yeah.
be destructive depending on the
Yes.
situation and the context and the person and whether someone can harness this or not. So could you talk to me about this concept of hyperfocus and maybe your own personal experiences with it and
Yeah.
how you found a way to make it work for you?
Oh, absolutely. So I am a hyperfocus queen. Good hyperfocus and bad hyperfocus. So before I talk into this as well, when you see my Instagram page as well, I use a lot of positive psychology because I feel like there's two kind of discussions around ADHD online, and it's the quite the negative, and then there's the kind of the positive side. And I will never ever diminish our struggles ever. I'm very, very vulnerable about my own, but I also have this deep belief system that we are exceptional human beings, absolutely exceptional brains. And I want, people with ADHD to really understand that they do have exceptional brains. And one of those things is hyperfocus. And something that I find, there's two types of hyperfocus that happen to me. I hyperfocus when I listen to my intuition, because what happens is when you start listening to your intuition, you go down a road that lights you up. And if you go down a road that lights you up, it opens up your creativity. So then what happens? You hyper focus onto that thing you absolutely love. So that's what happened with my page as well, as I hyper focused onto it, which for me is a really good thing, because I was hyper focusing into a space that was creative. And if your creativity is open, you're going to do exceptional things. But then there's another way that you hyper focus. And this is just my opinion. This is not from anybody else. This is that kind of my lived experience, is you hyper focus to avoid the boring tasks as well. So if you're sitting at a job or business and you hate it and you know it's not aligned, you're going to hyper focus onto things to avoid the thing that you don't want to do. So I find that I hyper focus either when I'm very lit up and doing something amazing in my business and I'm following my intuition, or I'm hyper focusing on something else because I'm avoiding the boring thing in front of me. So those are the two types of hyper focus that I experience. And I think with hyper focus, you have to be very aware of it, because you can burn yourself out. And I have a lot of energy, so I can hyper focus on something for about 3 months straight. But I also know that there is a burnout on the other side of that. And it's okay. I find I'm okay with that, because I know my energy, I work differently. And I'm very grateful that I have my own business, because my energy is different to others. So if I'm going to hyper focus, I'm going to allow myself to hyper focus into that space if it is following my intuition, with the understanding that when I hit that wall, it's okay. And I give myself the grace and the compassion to get through that kind of low bit, because with that kind of burnout can come a lot of anxiety and depression as well for me. But then just having the awareness that it's okay. So that's kind of my my take on it. So yeah.
Interesting. So just for those who are listening, and I mean, if anyone listening has ADHD, which a lot of my audience does, then I just want to, then you understand the concept of hyperfocus. But if someone's listening, they're like, well, I suspect I have it, and I don't know, I
Yeah.
haven't been formally diagnosed, right? Hyperfocus is not just like, intense concentration. That is not what we're talking about here. It is like a full immersion where your senses are almost, you almost like lose your sense of time. You
Yeah.
won't even hear, you got a fire alarms going off, and you're
Yeah.
so locked in on this one thing, and you become nearly inaccessible to the
Yeah.
outside world. And it's oftentimes during these hyper focus events where people with ADHD produce the most incredible work, and they have the most incredible breakthroughs. But as you're saying too, like, you're so yours can last for months, but if someone's, let's say,
Yeah.
hyper focusing for 3 days, they may not even eat, right? Like they may forget to drink. And so it is like we're
Yes.
talking about, even like your physical sensations become muted because you are so focused on this task.
Mm-hmm.
Like neurochemically, right? That is,
Yes.
there is like a neurochemical environment that's promoting this intense focus. So my question to you, when you find yourself hyper focusing on the wrong thing, and I know you've done so much work to say, well, I really try to have it be on the right thing and I'm listening to my intuition. But I have many clients, I work with adult professionals too, and they're like, I know I need to be doing these things, whether they're boring or just non preferred in some way. But I end up finding this thing and going
Yes.
all in over here, and they find it very hard to get themselves out of that
Yes.
hyper focus when it's on the wrong. I'm using air quoting, if this
Yes.
is on YouTube as well, but like if someone's listening, I'm air quoting on the wrong thing. What do you
Yes.
do when you're in that situation, or what advice do you have to others?
Okay, yes, this is this is happens to me all the time as well, because there are parts of my business that are boring, and I don't want to do boring. So I find something else, and and then what happens is I've got a to-do list, and then I hyper focus on something, and then I look at my to-do list and I'm overwhelmed because I didn't get through it. So
Mhm.
that's the tricky thing. So what I try and do, and this is hard because breaking a hyper focus is incredibly difficult. So the first thing I do is I communicate with my partner. And I say, I'm in a hyper focus. It's not the right thing. I just want to let you know, because hyper focus can be difficult for your partners and people around you as well. Because if they come and try break your hyper focus, they're going to get rejected
Mhm.
by you. So I just communicate that and say I'm in a hyper focus, whether it's a good or bad one for me. And then what I try to do is I look at my to-do list, and the boring things that I have to do, like the needle movers, but I don't really want to do it. I put 3 of them on my to-do list that I know I need to do, and I will get a bit of a dopamine rush when I tick it off. And I break them up in a way that suits me. And then I use the hyper focus as a reward. And then I put a timer on. So now this is you gotta, this is a bit of it takes a bit of time to practice this, because you got to break the hyper focus to go back to the boring thing. But it also works because you're using the thing that you really want to hyper focus on as your reward to doing the boring thing. And that's what I do. And then I break it with a timer. Yeah.
Okay. Timers, yes. My goodness. So
Yeah.
we're taking this big to-do list that you have, which, especially running a business, you're
Yeah.
going to have a to-do list that's just never ending, and you're
Yeah.
narrowing it down to 3 things. But
Yes.
even before that, we're coming back to calling a duck a duck. You're saying, I am in a hyper focus. It is on the wrong thing. I am
Yes.
telling my partner for some
Yeah.
accountability and just so
Yes.
for future forgiveness in case I reject them in their attempts to, reach me right
Exactly.
now. And you're saying, okay, I'm going to do these 3 things. I'm going to find a way to add some dopamine to them, right?
Yeah.
Because chasing the dopamine is a classic ADHD journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you're breaking down those tasks. You're setting a timer. The timer adds that urgency. I'm always talking about timers on this show, and the
Mm-hmm.
concept of novelty and urgency as
Yes.
being the 2 primary factors for motivation. And that is like absolutely for, neurotypical folks as well, but for ADHD, you got to have some novelty. You got to have
Yeah.
some urgency, and setting a timer and just doing it, and then maybe going back, your reward, going back into your hyper focus. I think that is an awesome strategy, and I'll bet it took a lot of experimenting on your
Yes.
part, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't, yeah, but you wouldn't even have arrived at that conclusion if you hadn't been open to being like, okay, this is what I have. I'm naming this thing. I am going to try. I'm going to follow my intuition. I am going to work even though on this thing, even though I am scared, even though I may be
Yeah.
rejected. This feels
Yeah.
aligned. It's all of that mindset stuff that has to be in place before you make a to-do list with 3 things on it, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, intuitively, I have always known this when I started a business. The mindset piece is the number one thing. It is. You got to do it first. And people like to skip it. It's like, I don't know what it is. It's like going, I love mindset. So I'm obsessed with it. I love it. But it's like it's like, you have to go to the dentist. So you don't get a cavity, but do we actually go to the dentist? It's kind of like that. It is so imperative to be able to, and it's not just the mindset work, because it's the subconscious mindset work as well, because what lives in our subconscious is our belief system. So what we are saying to ourselves, we are believing, and that our external reality it looks like it does because of what we are saying to ourselves. So the mindset work is such an important piece. And with that mindset work and the subconscious reprogramming is the radical acceptance. It is stop fighting yourself. There is we need tools, absolutely. There's things that can help us and support us in very different ways. There's things that I do. I reduce sugar in my diet. There's a lot of other things that I do. But it's the radical acceptance of this is who I am. And that brings in the self-love. And that changes how you talk to yourself. And then everything else follows from
Beautiful,
there.
Lindsay. I love that. And
Yeah.
your Instagram page, if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, oh my gosh, this whole thing is resonating with me, you share a lot of sort of, I am imagining it's what your internal narrative is and your internal dialogue. You're sharing that openly on your page where you may have a video of you doing something and there's, text over it saying like, this is what I'm thinking. This is what it's happening. So if someone hasn't yet developed that ability to either hear their own internal voice or recognize that their stories and their belief system aren't serving them and they need a model or a way to do this, then ADHD Club with a K is certainly a place to start. And with that, you have some kind of exciting things in the works. And so I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit. So what do you have coming down the pipeline, Lindsay?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my next step of working with my rejection sensitivity is I have always had a dream to create a community for ADHDers to come in and I facilitate their belief system and what they can do. So it's a space to really start looking at our rejection wounds and other wounds within ourselves that actually stops us doing all the things that we're wanting to do in our life. And this is going to be, a labor of love for me because I've always wanted a community. And one of my biggest gifts is just collaboration and inspiring others and just being real and authentic and seeing ADHD for what it is. I've got this strict kind of narrative around I don't like using toxic positivity. So I'm going to showcase our struggles, but I'm never going to stop reminding people with ADHD the brilliant things that they can do. And it's just getting unstuck and the belief system and moving even when scared. And this is the community that I'm going to be hopefully building in the near future.
You will, because you just put it out into the universe. So
I
your
did.
yes, your ADHD, community for ambitious women is in the works, and so we don't have a link to it right now. But when you put that, if you're listening to this or watching this in the future, everybody, there will be, as soon as that is alive and in the world, there will be a link in the show notes and the description box for you to check out that community because there is nothing more powerful for an individual than the power of community. I am convinced.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Lindsay, you have been awesome today. This conversation has just It's been so inspiring. And I have to be honest, I do talk on the show a lot. I do not have ADHD. It is my background. It is my educational experience. I have a master's in special ed and have been working with people with ADHD for a little over 20 years now. So I live, breathe, eat, sleep it, right? But to have someone on who can say, this is my lived experience, I just think that is so valuable. Thank you for sharing it with my listeners today.
It is such a pleasure. It's been such an honor being here. Thank you, Katie.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Lindsay Roberts. I am so grateful that she has followed her intuition and done that inner mindset work to share her story despite the fear of rejection. And as we talked about on the show, feeling fear of rejection is normal. That's just part of the human experience. But again, as I said on the show too, it is a whole different brand of fear when you have ADHD, related to all of the reasons and all of the inner workings that make an ADHD mind. So I wanted to reiterate that Lindsay is an incredible resource for those who are listening who, have ADHD or are supporting those with ADHD and you want to find better ways to support them. I will leave her links to all of those resources that I mentioned down in the show notes in the description box. You can find her at Instagram at ADHDKlub. Again, that's with a K. She also has a free resource available called the Rejection Rescue Kit. I will leave a link to that down below. And then ADHDKlub.com is where you can learn more about her forthcoming program, which is just, we need to have more community-centered places like that, if you ask me. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you for listening. And remember, never stop learning.